Yeah, I'm in. Phew. Thank you, thanks, bye. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Sorry. What a nightmare. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. I've got, just give me a few more seconds here. I got to admit some people. That was stressful and unpleasant. So sorry, and thank you for waiting. Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for your patience, everyone. Oh, is Jerry already here? Tech
He's
issues
logging
this
in.
morning, everybody. Seth, can you hear me? I wonder if we lost some people. Seth or Jerry, are you there? Let's see. What on earth? Can I have everybody unmute so I can see?
It'll take a while to get everybody's video and their voice going. It's extremely slow.
Hi, this is Seth. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, no problem.
I can't hear you very loudly. Let me turn up my volume. Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Seth, since we've made you wait and really appreciate it? I'm not quite sure what the issue was, but I couldn't even fix it for quite some time. Do you want to go ahead and launch your PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can share a screen here. I'm not showing any video. Okay, let's try.
Okay, hang on. I got to stop my share. I apologize. I'm doing a couple of things here.
Okay.
Let's see him.
No, I'm not sharing. I don't think. If you'd like me to, I can bring yours up. Okay, so I think we've got everybody. Raja, just so let's test it. Maybe she fell off. If you could put on your video and yeah, there you go. Okay, excellent. Very good. So did you guys all read Seth's bio? Executive Director.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Very impressive.
All right. Can you guys, can you see the PowerPoint now?
Yep, they're all saying yes. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on today, everyone. My name is Seth Whitehead, and I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Petroleum Resources Board. IPRB is funded by the Illinois oil production industry, and our mission is public outreach and education regarding the Illinois oil production industry. So since we're pretty crunched for time, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. In Illinois, we don't have any publicly traded companies. It's mostly locally owned companies. 90% of our production occurs in 15 Southern Illinois counties where only 2% of the population lives. We produce 8.25 million barrels of oil a year. For a little perspective, that's 0.25% of U.S. production. But we do have a lot of potential for the future. 3.75 billion barrels have been produced in Illinois. 4 billion technically recoverable barrels remain. And although our share of the total U.S. industry is very small. The industry is very important, especially in our part of the state. And you can see some of the economic impact figures there. 14,000 jobs, 3.04 billion annual economic impact. 83% of our firms have 10 or fewer employees. More than half of the folks employed in the industry are independent contractors or non-employee firms. And it's a big employer down here in the southeastern region of the state. Challenges faced by the Illinois industry, leasing. We have severed minerals in Illinois, so the minerals get severed throughout the generations. The political climate is oftentimes hostile towards oil and natural gas. Illinois is a very blue state, super majorities in both houses, both the House and the Senate. Shortage of qualified labor, as many of the experienced workers have retired or moved to larger producing states. So, and of course, oil prices, which is with the pandemic and the decrease in demand has driven down oil prices and affected the economy across the board. So just to summarize, Illinois has a resilient, important oil production industry. It's operated more than a century. The industry provides revenue and jobs to an economically depressed area of the state. And though we are a mature basin, there's a lot of potential for the future. So that's just kind of a summary of the industry as a whole. Since this is a law class, I know you guys would be interested in hearing about our regulatory structure in Illinois. We are regulated by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Office of Mines and Minerals. The statutes that regulate the production industry are the Illinois Oil and Gas Act, which is very comprehensive, that passed in 1951 and has been amended and updated several times. The Illinois High Volume Hydraulic Fracturing Act was passed a few years ago. And that's also considered the most comprehensive regulations of high volume hydraulic fracturing, shale, or just kind of what's known as modern fracking in the United States. Notably though, there hasn't been any shale development in Illinois as of yet. And of course, we're also regulated at the federal level, Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Community Rights to Know Act, which requires chemical disclosure, frac fluid, for instance, on safety data sheets. OSHA, of course, regulates the workforce, and Superfund for spill cleanup and large scale things like that. So I hope I didn't take too long, and I tried to touch on several subjects, but if you guys have any questions about Illinois or the Illinois basin, of course, you guys are in Indiana. Indiana produces about 2 million barrels of oil a year. Like Illinois, the upstream and midstream industries are important in Indiana. In Illinois, we have 4 refineries and also the second largest oil storage facility in the country. So those 4 refineries and the midstream industry directly employ another 11,000 Illinoisans, and the average wage for those direct jobs in the industry are over $100,000 a year. So it's well-paying jobs, and it's quantity and quality. So, with that, I will just open up to see if we have any questions.
I'm going to start, Seth, just because I want to talk a little bit more about you. And let me thank you profusely for waiting on the line. Much appreciated. Same to the students.
No problem.
So your background is actually in journalism, correct? I think your background is kind of, it'll convey to the students your perspective that you weren't historically an oil and gas guy, although you came from an oil and gas family.
Yeah, that's correct. My grandfather and my father and my father's grandfather all worked in the industry. They pumped wells, the local stripper wells here in in our neck of the woods. So I've always been around the oil industry. But when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a journalist. So I went that direction, and basically transitioned more to the oil industry around 2008. My father wanted to try to drill some wells that he and my grandpa talked about for years, but never really took a chance on. And but we actually got a couple wells, and it just kind of grew from there. My writing background and my research background helped me transition into the career that I have now.
And you were at Energy in Depth?
Yeah, that's the Independent Petroleum or Association of America's program. It was specifically designed to address some of the issues that came up when the shale revolution took off around 2008. So that's where I was before I was with IPRB.
Yeah, and that's got a significant readership, doesn't it? How many people does Energy in Depth reach?
Boy, I would, it's a national program, so
Yeah.
I've never seen its reach, but in hard figures, but it's in the hundreds of thousands for sure.
Yeah,
It's
so
widely read.
that was it. Yeah, that was a very important position you had, and we talk a lot about good resources for the students to get information. And in my opinion, Energy in Depth is the #1 spot to get it. So appreciate your work there. I have a couple more questions, and I'll turn it over to students. You said that there has been no shale production yet in Illinois.
Yeah, that's correct. There's only really been one application for a permit, and that permit was withdrawn. So yeah, there hasn't been a single high volume hydraulic frac in Illinois.
So when I was working heavily in Indiana, I'm in Pittsburgh now, there was the talk of the ban on fracking, and it was so hard to get a permit through in Illinois because they were backlogged and understaffed. And has that situation resolved itself?
Well, it's my understanding that the IDNR hired a handful of many lawyers, many attorneys to handle what they anticipated to be sort of a rush of applications in Illinois, and that's never happened. It's a big driver has been oil prices have been more often than not fairly depressed over the last 4 years, but that staff remains. So I think that they have the staff to handle it now for sure.
Is there a ban on fracking?
Oh no, there isn't. There's legislation usually proposed every year to not only try to ban high volume hydraulic fracturing, but the fracking that's been used on conventional wells since the 1950s. So there's always some, except for this year. This year was one exception. There's almost always some bill proposed, usually from a legislator that comes from the area of the state where there's absolutely no oil production going on, that attempts to ban all sorts of hydraulic fracturing and by extension oil production altogether.
Yeah. Yep. Students, do you have questions for Seth? We do appreciate his time with us today.
I have one, if I can, real quick. Oh, I don't know who spoke.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at your lack of the qualified workforce. I guess I'm curious as to kind of where you think that's coming from. Is it people not wanting to go into the industry, or not wanting, is there a lack of opportunity to go to a trade and learn what needs the skills that need to be learned for your degree? Or I guess where's that coming from?
It's a combination of two things. The workforce currently is largely retiring, and the millennial generation has largely just assumed that oil and gas won't be necessary in the next 2 decades, that it's quickly there's not going to be any job security there, and just the negative perception about the industry has led to a real lack of of younger folks going and seeking out that type of career. But, you know, I just saw a Department of Energy report that shows that 70% of our energy, or almost 70%, just under 70%, still comes from oil and gas in the United States. And all the way out to 2040, that same percentage is expected to be from oil and gas. So really, although there is definitely volatility in the industry, we are going to be using oil and gas, a lot of oil and gas for many years. And it basically boils down to the choice: do we want to produce it here, or go back to the days, you know, back in 2007, where we were importing record amounts. We were the top importer in the United States. So I think that there's, you know, some younger people are pretty savvy and pretty, you know, realize that, and if they take advantage of that reality, then they'll have a really great career. But as far as just the general consensus of the younger folks is that oil and gas is bad, the future is bleak, I don't want to go that direction.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to do a follow-up on Jason's point too. Thank you, Seth. That was awesome. We talk a lot about balancing. You're speaking about a decline, and I know that they're predicting 2021 being a bleak year for the oil industry. What do you see, or do you see trends in the oil industry as it relates to renewable resources and alternative forms of energy, being able to get early buy-in from the oil industry executives or companies so they can diversify their portfolios as well? Do you see trends in that area?
Yeah, I generally believe that we will truly have an all of the above energy approach going forward. I believe that renewable energy will be needed and that it will grow, but I also believe that our energy demand in general will grow, and especially throughout the world as developing nations start to attain a higher standard. So we'll need all sources of energy, and there's no doubt that we'll still need oil, even if we're not burning it for transportation at the level we are. There's literally thousands of uses for oil, and natural gas is pretty much necessary to back up the intermittency of renewable energy. The battery storage technology to deploy it at scale just isn't there. So that's why, you know, you look at the presidential election, and when Biden changed his position on fracking, it wasn't just pandering to win Pennsylvania. It's a reality that natural gas is going to be a huge part of the energy mix moving forward, as it will help renewable growth as well. In fact, for every at the same rate the renewables have grown over the last 15 years, the Department of Energy has found that natural gas capacity has grown as well, in concert with it, basically because that for electricity generation, it needs that backup, which I think we've seen in California, where when demand just went off the charts over the summer, they had to import energy from other states, natural gas fired for the most part. And obviously the demand got so high that there were blackouts. So whether oil and gas remain any more popular or less popular moving forward, you can not like it, but the reality remains that I think we're still going to need it, and a lot of it, for years to come, for sure.
Thank you. And to that end, that prompted me to ask a follow-up question then. So after listening to you, that's good news, because it provides me and our classmates and this generation opportunities within the oil industry. Perhaps it will be a great idea too for oil industries to market not just the crude oil aspect of employment, but also to this other, in other words, bifurcate their marketing or recruitment so people can understand and have a better knowledge base as to how we function as a society and how much we rely on oil and gas. So that's promising to hear you say that. I just think that it sounds as if like the marketing and recruitment strategies within the confines of oil industry have sort of taken a back seat to our earnings and profitability.
All right. Well, I'll take an opportunity now to say that the oil and gas industry did a really bad job of public outreach and education for many decades. And I'll throw the majors under the bus. I'm not going to name names, but the major companies just for years really didn't think that it was necessary to spend a whole lot of money trying to educate people on energy use. So that's what we're making up for lost time now. That's what my job is all about. And I just try to keep it at a fact-based approach. I hope that, a lot of times people will say, you don't get emotional and you don't tell, you're not a storyteller, you're just so fact-based. But I really think that we have to remain fact-based just to level up the conversation and just make it clear to the general public that we can't just say no more oil and gas tomorrow. It would be an economic and societal disaster to be blunt. So we're gonna need a lot of energy moving forward, and a good share of it will remain from oil and gas.
Seth, Jerry hasn't signed on yet, so we'll keep going if you don't mind, or do you have time pressures?
Actually, I am here.
Oh,
No,
you
I
are?
can go for a few
Oh,
minutes.
hey, Jerry.
Hey.
Okay, I was just going to ask Seth about big oil. He threw out some facts that big oil doesn't dominate the market in the U.S. as people think it does. And then I wanted to ask about clean air, that actually air quality is improving. Seth, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You were great. The students appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Do you mind if I stay on?
No, not at all. You
Thank
can
you.
answer those questions too if you'd like. I'll just do a brief intro for Jerry. Jerry is a wonderful guy,
Okay.
Executive Vice President of Domestic Energy Producers Alliance. We want to hear about why you got the Energy Advocate of the Year in 2012 and your thoughts on the industry.
Okay, well, that's great. So I assume you can hear me and see me then. All right.
Yes.
Okay, because we just moved our offices and I'm in what's a little studio, and the AV guy is coming this morning to hook this up. So this is all my rigging. So I apologize if it doesn't work properly, but
It does.
okay, I caught about the last 5 minutes of Seth, and I thought that was a great discussion, and I can go into that a little bit more. But to get that award in 12, Energy Advocate of the Year, I'm probably maybe a little bit different personality than Seth. I do get very passionate, and I was roaming around the country in a previous position. I was the executive director of the National Association of Royalty Owners, representing the estimated 10 million people, individual private citizens that own mineral interest and get production from oil and gas operations. And I would get very passionate on their behalf. The majority of those folks, my average member in that organization was a 60-year-old widow that made $500 a month on royalty checks. So it was easy to get passionate about those people, and so that's kind of where I was then. Now it's completely different. I'm working at an industry association. And my chairman is one of the most influential folks in domestic energy, and that's Harold Hamm from Continental Resources. And just so everybody knows, a personal friend of President Trump's before there was ever an election. So he has been an energy advisor there, and he's chairman of our board of directors. And so my shift from representing the royalty owners to industry folks has been not necessarily dramatic, but it certainly is different.
Excellent. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share about what, how big oil has been demonized and how actually there's a lot of small producers in the country that are extremely important, and clean air and fracking and whatever you'd like to talk about?
Okay, I'll go into several things along those lines. And again, Seth was on point when it comes to this industry being its own worst enemy, really, when it comes to talking about what we do and what the average American citizen doesn't realize about the oil and gas industry. And for that matter, the fossil fuel industry and what it's done for the planet. I'll throw out some facts and figures here. This is some stuff that we've been working up recently in some of our Washington, D.C. talking points. We've got 7 issues we're working right now. And one of them is just the reality of, and again, Seth hit it, EIA, Energy Information Administration, and IEA, International Energy Administration, project out into 2040, 2050, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the energy consumed on this planet is going to be from fossil fuels. That's coal, oil, and natural gas. And so, people can talk about making changes. You can talk about Green New Deals all day long. But here's some realities. The price tag for the Green New Deal, the one that Biden has proposed, is $2 trillion. The one that AOC proposed is $30 trillion. And those are dollars scattered over 10 years' time. Here's the reality of the situation. Again, based on our energy consumption worldwide, all right? If you're going to do that, today, the world consumes 492 exajoules, if I'm saying that properly, of fossil fuels. Since last month, there were 5,212 days until 2035. And that's the Biden plan, 2035. To get to net zero by 2035, and that's, again, some states, California wants to do that, and the Biden plan calls for that, you would need 0.1 exajoules every day, starting today, actually starting last month, for 5,212 days. What is that? That's 2 nuclear power plants or 3,000 2.5 megawatt wind turbines. Think about that. Every day you've got to install that much to replace the energy we're using now. Not expanding any energy usage, okay? This is just what we're using worldwide today. You've got to do that every day between now and 2035. Is that going to happen? No, it's flat not going to happen, all right? And if you wanted to do that, do we have the materials to build 3,000 wind turbines a day? Do we have the materials to build 3,000 a year? All right, talk to the kids that are mining cobalt. All right, I can get so passionate about this. People in this country don't give a flip about where their energy comes from or what it means to turn on a cell phone or anything about the energy infrastructure. And again, that's where we as an industry have done such a poor job about telling folks what it's all about. What does it mean when you flip on a light switch? Where does that come from? The city of Los Angeles gets an awful lot of its electric power from a coal-fired power plant in Utah, all right? Do they tell the folks in LA that that's where their electricity is coming from? Heck no, they don't. They demonize oil, they demonize coal, they demonize natural gas. And again, I can go on and on. Something else, another huge issue for us that people don't realize is going on is that there's something called the Renewable Fuel Standard, all right? And that requires states and the federal government to require certain mixes of fuel across the country. In the last few months, we have lost over 700,000 barrels a day of refining capacity in this country because of the renewable fuels standard. What does that mean? That's 4% of our refining capacity. If the economy comes back and we start producing like we were before and we need diesel and jet fuel and gasoline, we're going to be short. We're going to have to go somewhere else. We're going to have to go offshore to get the refined products that we need because we as a society have decided that we want to be green, all right? And we would rather have our crude oil and products manufactured somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened to us and why our manufacturing left here is because the Chinese and the Russians, they'll provide all the energy and all the labor you want. The Russians will provide the energy, the Saudis will provide the energy, and the Chinese will provide the labor. And so we lost a lot of manufacturing that we want to bring back to this country. And the way to do that is with reliable, inexpensive energy. And that, for the most part, is natural gas when it comes to manufacturing. I can go on about different issues that we've got right now, but maybe I ought to back off and see if there's any questions, or if you want me to go a different route.
No, you're doing great, Jerry. I'll hit you with one question. We do talk about manufacturing as being a big factor that not too many people think about. But I want to talk about the economy quickly. Just reached the $31 trillion mark in debt, which is double the previous national debt due to the Corona bailout. So if renewables are not a viable alternative at this time, the leave it in the grounders are essentially making it more expensive to produce gas, thereby hurting the economy. Is that about correct?
I absolutely agree with that. And if you want the best example of switching over to old technologies, let's get that clear. All right. As a society, humans gave up on solar and wind power 100 years ago because they're not effective. And we've raised the bar. We're better at manufacturing energy with those two sources, but they're not going to solve any problems. Okay, they're not going to take over what we need in energy usage today.
Jerry?
So look at Germany. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, do you think, I want you to continue with that, but do you think that the people, the green movement, the Green New Deal, the leave it in the ground, do you think they actually believe that renewables can fill the void?
Here's the thing, and it's hard for me to call, to broad brush a whole movement of folks as hypocrites. But however, if the goal truly is to reduce CO2, if that's really and truly what the green movement is all about, is that we are afraid that our emissions of CO2 are raising the temperature of the planet, then 15 years ago, they would have been 100% behind nuclear power. There'd be a nuclear power plant on every street corner generating electricity, CO2 free, okay? And so if it's really about that, then why aren't they doing that? Why aren't we doing that? Why are they not wanting to allow any more hydro? Because of fish, because of other environmental concerns. Well, it's CO2 free, all right, if you're gonna do that. So, and I did wanna go back to the point I was making earlier, is if you wanna look at a society that has failed when it comes to wind and solar, go to Germany. They've got the highest price electricity in all of Europe. And that's because they went to wind and solar. Why is it so high? It's because they still have to have coal and natural gas to back it all up, all right? So but those are realities. You'll hear Germany touted as, well, they've switched everything over. Well, yeah, look at what it's cost them. Same in California. The reason they're having rolling blackouts and all is because they've mandated things that don't work.
I'm going to open it up to some questions for students, but can you tell us about your involvement in lifting the ban on exports?
Yeah, I was actually, so where I work today as the president and CEO of DEPA was formed 11 years ago. And as the then executive director of NARO, I was asked to participate on the board of directors. And in that role, we would go to Washington, D.C. and lobby Congress on certain issues. And one of them that came about was in, again, a force of nature. Our chairman, Harold Hamm, in 2012, at a press event in D.C., stood up and told everybody that we were going to lift the crude oil export ban that had been in place for 40 years. And quite frankly, everybody in the room snickered a little bit and thought, well, this guy's lost it. And then in 15, he said, this is the year we're going to do this. And we worked diligently. We went to, in less than a year's time, we visited with every single US senator on the issue. Didn't matter whether they agreed with us or not. I can tell you, one of my favorite recollections of that was Cory Booker. We walked in and he said, I'm not with you guys. But we sat and talked to him for an hour, and it was a great conversation and mutual respect. But we knew he wasn't going to vote with us. What happened, though, we had it in a transportation bill that was probably going to be a struggle to pull it through, but we ended up getting it in the omnibus spending bill that year. which was President Obama's spending bill. And so that helped it through. And so we got it lifted. And in January of 16, the first barrel was exported from Houston by Enterprise Partners, and the rest is history, so they say.
I'm just wondering how many people know about that. It's such a huge economic factor. In the law did not keep up with reality. It was very slow to change, right? And why would it be resistant? And it was in such a time that we needed an economic boost.
Well, what was interesting was the number one question that we would get from members of Congress was, well, if we do that, if we start exporting our oil, aren't gasoline prices going to go up? And just a few years prior, gasoline prices were very expensive. And whenever that happens, Congress will pull the CEOs of the largest oil companies in this country into a hearing, and they'll berate them for gasoline prices being $4 a gallon across the country and want to know why. And it has nothing to do with that. It was all market driven, and so that was our answer. Is if we are allowed to enter the world market, and that's just when the shale revolution was really taking off, and the Permian Basin and North Dakota and the Bakken were coming on, and we had all of this really, really nice, light, sweet crude that we could export around the world. And there, quite frankly, there was excess refining capacity for that crude oil in different parts of the world that we didn't have here in this country. Most of our refining was set up for heavy crudes. We assumed we were going to be shipping in crude oil from Venezuela, which is a really heavy, nasty crude, for years and years. So all of our refiners were set up that way. So to get it done, and if everyone remembers, pre-COVID, when the economy was going well, the worldwide economy was going well, and we were exporting our crude, what did happen to oil prices? They stabilized, which is exactly what we said would happen. When we became the swing producer, which is who we are now, not the Saudis, we became the worldwide swing producer. We stabilized oil prices, much to our own demise in some companies. That we dropped the price down to around 40, 50 bucks, and that's where it stayed. And it'd be nicer if it was around 60 or 70.
Jerry, Seth was talking, you confirmed that the industry has not done a good job with PR. It just didn't seem like it was needed. I've been practicing oil and gas law for over 25 years, and it just was such different sentiment at the beginning. The country seemed to be very pro oil and gas. But I just wanted to talk about that as in the purpose behind both of your organizations, educational, and yours, Jerry, is political. You talked about 7 points for your Washington, D.C. talking points. Are you free to share with us what some of the others are? And talk maybe a little bit about your organization and why it's needed.
Yeah, we have several issues. One of them is American Gulf Coast Select. So most of you are going to be familiar with WTI. When you see crude oil prices quoted, there's the Brent crude that comes out of the North Sea, and then there's WTI. And WTI is West Texas Intermediate, and it's traded at Cushing, Oklahoma, which is a nowhere spot in Oklahoma, not far from where I live right now. But that's where the crossroads of all the pipelines from around the country ended up once upon a time, and they just kept building out. And there's lots of storage capacity there, above ground storage tank capacity there. And so that's where they would trade the crude, and the traders would work from the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and other exchanges over time. But recently the CME would trade crude at Cushing. Back in April of this year, crude, I don't know if you guys remember or not, but crude prices went negative. They closed the day at about a negative $37. We asked for and got an investigation launched into CME in that trading day by the CFTC. And there's actually now a lawsuit along those lines where they believe they have found, the company that's filed the suit believes they found a smoking gun with some traders out of Britain, as a matter of fact, that they think were manipulating the market that day. And that's up to them. We're not involved in the lawsuit, but we certainly were all about getting something done. Well, as a result of that, we helped form a new organization and establish the American Gulf Coast Select, AGS, as a new trading point. And it will trade light sweet crude at the Gulf Coast in this country, at Houston and Corpus Christi and places like that. Platts has already started a trading platform, as well as Argus. Those are two big traders that by the end of this year, we expect we'll be trading AGS. And again, it's part of the purpose of that was not just because of that negative trading day, but there's always been a differential between WTI and Brent. And in some years, that has been $10, $15 a barrel. And that's significant. And so we wanted to shrink that as well. So we want to compete on the world market. And we saw the AGS as a way to do that. We also are developing talking points on the dangers of the Green New Deal. We believe that spending trillions of dollars especially on technologies that today don't work, as I've mentioned before. Wind and solar are fine, but they're not going to solve our problems. So we've got to look at other issues. Let me see what else we've got. I told you about the refining issue that's already out there. There's something called ESG, Environmental Social Governance, that it's a voluntary program by lending institutions. And over the last couple of years, that's kind of turned into a de facto requirement from banks and lenders to oil companies that you have to have developed a good ESG program before they want to lend you any money. And that's fine. And we have an ESG committee, and we've put together some materials for our membership so that they know how to build those plans. But hand in hand with that.
Can I interrupt you there? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's hard to know when to insert a question. We talked last week about the environmental, social, and governance movement because we read a news story that said that regardless of who wins the election, there could be an increase in regulation based upon this movement from the populace and investors and banks. And it was JP Morgan Chase who said they weren't going to invest in fossil fuels anymore. So we just talked about that. I told the students they'd hear ESG again in the future. So yeah, what do you think about that? The banks enforcing ESG?
We've seen exactly that. Again, a voluntary program has almost become some type of a rule or a regulation that they want to operate under, and we're not necessarily fighting it. But what we're saying is that okay, if you're going to develop an ESG as an oil company, you should develop it and show the good that you do. Again, all of the stuff in our lives that relies on oil and natural gas, from our cell phones to our computers, cosmetics, medications, everything that happens. Go to an emergency room and look around and remove anything in that emergency room that has to do with fossil fuels. And do you want to be wheeled in there with somebody beating on your chest in a dirt floor shack, basically is what you're left with? I don't. I want everything they've got that's going to help me. But along those lines, so another one of our issues is lender bias. We believe that through this kind of ESG evolution, that lenders have become biased. There have been statements made by BlackRock. I think they control about $7 trillion in investment money around the world. But statements that have been made that we believe shows a bias against lending to viable oil and gas companies. I'm not talking about companies that might be about to go belly up, but viable companies having a hard time getting any money. And along those lines, we have asked the Department of Justice to take a look at that. Our submission was has to be confidential, but it is part of public record. It's just that what we submitted can't be seen right now. It can't be FOIA'd right now because we want them to look at it, and we don't want anybody to take any heat over it. We don't want any retribution from some of the companies that might be looked at. That we've provided information on, again, on what they were saying publicly. And I can go on and on about that. Another thing that we're concerned about along these same lines is stimulus funding. Oil and gas companies were able to take advantage of the first stimulus round and get PPP money, like most folks, to protect payrolls. These are small companies that were able to do that. We did hear that when it came to the Main Street lending program, that there were some folks that were reluctant to lend to oil and gas companies under that program because they thought, well, you were going to go out of business anyway. And this COVID thing probably just forced you over the edge. Well, that's yet to be seen, you know. So did the local shoe store that's applied for that have the same scrutiny put on them? Probably not. So we're looking at that as well. If there's another stimulus package, another round, we're not advocating, and actually that's something about independent oil and gas companies that, and again, I don't know if Seth covered this or not, but produce, the smaller companies produce about, I think it's 90% of the oil and gas in this country. It's not the Exxon Mobils, it's the smaller companies. But we want to be sure that they have access to that money if it's made available, and they're not discriminated against just because they're an oil and gas company.
Thank you, Jerry. And you mentioned you have several board meetings and lots of things to prepare for. Your time is very valuable, and you carved out some time for us. We appreciate that. It's getting close, but I wanted to see if the students have any questions for you, because it's really an opportunity for them to get to speak with someone like you. So questions from students?
I did have a question.
Go ahead.
I was curious as to, I know we had talked about just like getting informed and understanding like how, I guess, how oil and gas works and our dependence on different kinds of things. How do companies like yours look into how to, like, I guess, address that issue in varying generations? Like you said, there's obviously, you know, from, I guess, a young age, like we've never been really taught. And so like, where's the best place to go and like truly find, you know, Seth spoke to the facts, and there's a lot of like with less emotion, whereas like there's a lot of emotion here. It's like, where's the best place to go to truly understand, so you know, you can truly build like your own effort and your own idea of like what would be best and what to do, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a great question. And again, this industry has struggled with it. There was an effort here in my home state. By the way, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But in my home state years ago, it was called the Oklahoma Energy Resources Board, established by state law, where a fractional percentage of each dollar made by an oil and gas company is put into a fund. And they created this new agency whose responsibility started out to go out and clean up old abandoned oil and gas facilities. And they did a great job of that, and they're still doing that. But that expanded into an educational program. And they have programs from K through 12 where they teach the teachers, and they also then teach the students, and they make programs available to them. They have special camps for the teachers during the summer months where they can kind of get an energy education and see and go back to the students and teach them how important it is that there's oil and gas. And again, that being a geologist or a petroleum engineer is not such a bad thing. And maybe some of them would consider that. So it's been successful. Other states have tried different things along those same lines to educate kids. State of California and their regulatory program, it's called DOGGR, the Department of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Energy or something like that. They did a very similar thing. They did some coloring books and different things to try to educate young kids and let them know that, again, what happens when you flick on a light switch? It's not magic. It's real things do happen, and that energy comes from someplace.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, that was James that asked that question. And so many people across the country do not know about oil and gas, but the same thing is true for the economy. We talk about how to be a solid voter and an educated voter. And I think the two issues go hand in hand, the impact of oil and gas on the economy. But the more we know about economics, I think the better voters we are.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the really kind of frustrating things when you look at polling data and people ask about energy. they're not willing. They want to have clean air and clean water. Who doesn't? We all want that stuff. But then when you ask them what they're willing to spend for a green energy program or a green program, it's nothing. That the American public does not want to spend their money on it, which really makes it kind of interesting to me. I think it's a hard thing. I believe because we've been an automobile society for generations now, and we're used to that. We're used to going to the gas station and filling up our car. So when that impacts us, and when it impacts our pocketbooks and what we can spend on any other thing in our life because of the price of gasoline, then I think people believe they have a right to that. And it's not that it's a commodity that they're buying, like, they're going to go buy a steak. Well, if steak prices get too high, you're going to start buying ground beef. Well, when it comes to gasoline, you don't have a choice. If you're going to go to work, you're going to get in your car, go to work, you got to buy that gasoline. So it impacts their life. So people have this, they realize that, it comes from oil in the ground and all that kind of stuff, I think. But at the same time, they think that, well, it's not fair that somebody's making a whole lot of money off of it. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. So, but I think that that's something in the psyche there, at least in my worldview. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know.
No, when gas got to $3.85 per gallon, people did panic. And then I wonder if underlying thoughts would kind of realign. Jerry and Seth, both of you, do you have any parting thoughts you'd like to share with the students? We've got a great group of students here.
I actually have one question. I'm sorry, Jerry. Sorry, Seth.
Go ahead.
It's in regard to what you're talking about. Sorry, Professor. I just wanted to see. Thank you for your service to our country, first and foremost. But I wanted to talk about the Renewable Fuel Standard Act and how that plays when you mentioned being able to create power plants or we don't have the capacity to do 2 power plants, et cetera. But how is this affecting our military readiness, in the sense that, if you could talk a little bit, if you have a knowledge base on that? I agree with what you're saying. I also understand that twofold: ESG, what we as a society or society as a whole, the direction we move in, versus the practicality of where we are as a country, the dependence, and how the military, how they balance the two. Because there are people within this class who have served and continue to serve in the United States military. So do you have any knowledge on that?
I don't. I do know that the military in previous years has looked at and actually kind of got, at least in my view, kind of wrapped around the axle on the concern about global warming and green issues and that kind of stuff, instead of paying attention to the fact of, where's the energy that we need? And it sounds like you well know, as I do, as an Air Force veteran, the military runs on liquid fuels, plain and simple. We've got some nuclear powered subs and such, but basically it's oil and 100%. Gas. And then when you add into all that, what it takes to make a tank. You can't make a tank without coal and natural gas. You just can't do it.
Yeah, so I was going to say then, this is my follow-up. In Indiana, for example, we were talking about advanced biofuels about 10 years ago, and it was a big push. But now you hear basically nothing on that end. And to that end, the knowledge base goes down. People aren't informed. They don't want to inform. I've learned so much just by professors' output towards us as students, but I didn't have any clue before I got into this class about the oil industry. So, let's talk about biofuels and the military stuff. We can go on forever, but this is the challenge, and I totally get it. I get it.
Well, and actually to that, if you're really interested, go and look at some of the refinery issues that I talked about, the closing of the refineries. Some of those refineries I think there's 7 that have recently closed. There's a list of others that are switching over to biofuels. That's what it's going to make biodiesel is what they're up to. which again is something that the military is going to take full advantage of. And I don't know this, but I wouldn't doubt that that's why they're converting over.
Yep, 100%.
Some DOD contracts. So
100%, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We've gone a little bit over, but
Okay.
we really appreciate it. All of us do. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Jerry.
Right.
Thanks to the
Thanks.
student. We will sign off.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks for
everybody.
having us on. I'm glad we got to do this.
Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Thanks all.
Thank you.